Jacob the Supplanter. Abraham is the first person in Genesis to be recorded as having a long-term personal relationship with God. He learns more every step of the way. When he dies, he has learned much about God and faith, and is ready for his descendants to carry on in this light. Isaac's life is not that detailed. It is almost as if he is a placeholder of some sort. An intermediate step to the main person who will carry the Abrahamic covenant to the fullest. Jacob is that man.
Memory text. Genesis 27:36. And Esau said, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and now look, he has taken away my blessing." And he said, "Have you not reserved a blessing for me?" Jacob's life is first filled with deceit. He deceives his father, and not only steals blessings meant for his older brother, Esau, but literally supplants him as eldest.
Jacob himself will be deceived and have turmoil in his life. God works with humans, shortcomings and all. Jacob goes on to reap many blessings from God, carrying on the covenant made with Abraham.
Jacob and Esau.
We should not be too hard on Jacob. After all, prophecies were made about him and Esau.
Genesis 25:23. And the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, 2 peoples shall be separated from your body, 1 people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger.
Right away, we find out what kind of personalities Jacob and Esau have.
Genesis 25:27-28. So the boys grew. And Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, but Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Esau is seen as a rugged man filled with love of hunting. Jacob is described as mild, but the translation points to being blameless or even perfect. One day when Esau comes home tired and very hungry, Jacob agrees to give him some lentil stew he has cooked. But not free. Jacob wants something, Esau's birthright. Esau put his wants and needs before anything, including family matters. A birthright was the rights of the oldest son. The oldest son had many inheritance rights and family privileges. It would be lifelong. All others would literally be under him. It seems that Esau sealed his fate during this encounter with Jacob.
As God told Rebekah, the older would serve the younger. Not only did Jacob receive the material blessings, but he is now charged with the spiritual aspect of the covenant as well.
Jacob and Rebekah deceive Isaac into giving his full blessing before he dies. Even though this is a terrible thing to do, Jacob was the one better to receive and carry on the hope of the promises of Abraham. It was through Jacob that the Messiah would come from.
Because of the deceptions and the lost blessings, Esau hated his brother, and this led to future tragedies. Something good came out of all this, but that should never be an excuse. Don't excuse bad behavior just because it leads to something good. Doing the right thing and trusting God are traits of the faithful Christian.
Jacob's ladder. Esau is angry enough now to kill Jacob for all of his deceptions. Both Rebekah and Isaac tell Jacob to flee to Rebekah's family. On this journey, he finds a stone he uses as a pillow. He falls asleep and has a dream.
Genesis 28:12-13. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven, and there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your descendants.
The Lord standing above the ladder compares to the Lord standing up, as if God is the ladder itself. Here we have a reversal of what happened with the Tower at Babel. Man made an attempt to reach and be God.
Now Jacob sees God reaching down to meet him. Since we cannot reach God on our own doing, God reaches down to us. It is there that we find salvation. Genesis 28:17. And he was afraid and said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven."
Jacob names this place Bethel, or house of God. The stone could be a symbol of the cornerstone for building an earthly temple and sanctuary. Jesus later refers to himself in this regard, quoting Psalm 118:22, "The stone which the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone."
Genesis 28:20-22. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, "If God will be with me, and keep me in this way that I am going, and give me bread to eat and clothing to put on, so that I come back to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set as a pillar shall be God's house, and of all that you give me I will surely give a tenth to you."
Jacob worships God, makes a vow, and then does as Abraham did. He offers a tenth of his blessings to God. This offering is not to find favor. It is a gracious response to what God has already blessed him with. Note that we have seen the concept of tithing in two major ways, long before God frees his people from Egypt.
Our response to God should be similar. Tithing, offering, sacrifice. It all points to our response to God. A loving response and complete gratitude. It is not an attempt to earn salvation. We must be sure that our offerings are done in a likewise manner.
The deceiver deceived. After the dream of the ladder to heaven, Jacob continues to the destination of his journey. As he approaches his destination, all those things must be still on his mind. He comes to a well with a large stone covering it. The shepherds are gathered there waiting to water their flocks. Jacob learns they are relatives of Laban, the sister of his mother, Rebekah.
Genesis 29:8-12. But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered together, and they have rolled the stone from the well's mouth, then we water the sheep." Now while he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. And it came to pass, when Jacob saw Rachel the daughter of Laban his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban his mother's brother, that Jacob went near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the flock of Laban his mother's brother. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's relative and that he was Rebekah's son. So she ran and told her father.
Jacob loves Rachel very much, and Laban agrees to give her in marriage for 7 years of work. Jacob fulfills this, but the morning after the wedding, he finds he has married Leah. Laban has somehow deceived Jacob into marrying her and not Rachel.
Genesis 29:25. So it came to pass in the morning, that behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served you? Why then have you deceived me?"
Jacob learned firsthand the hurting consequences of deception. Now he has learned that deception is wrong, as he complains to Laban. Does Jacob have a right to complain about being deceived? After all, we could consider this a payback for his own deceptions. In a broken world, we sometimes want to get even with evil people. Perhaps we even think of paying back evil with evil. God has asked us to trust him.
Jacob gives a model response here. He moves past this deception, and even agrees to work 7 more years for Rachel's hand. How easy it would have been for Jacob to want to get revenge. At the start of this week's lesson, we learned how Jacob's character was different than Esau's.
The blessing of the family. Jacob lived with Laban for 14 years. They were filled with burdens, but also joy and prosperity. During this time, Jacob will have 11 of the 12 sons whose descendants will become the people we refer to as the children of Israel, God's chosen people.
Leah is unloved, but God opens her womb. This phrase can mean that these children were true miracles from God. Leah's first is named Reuben. The meaning of this name denotes that God saw that she was unloved. When she has Simeon, his name means heard. God heard her sufferings. This is similar to the story of Hagar. God heard her plea and saw her plight. Leah gives birth to Judah, the very lineage of the Messiah. Judah gives a meaning of praise. She has praised God for being blessed with His grace. When Leah appears to be unable to bear any more children, God finally opens Rachel's womb. She gives birth to Joseph. His name implies that Rachel feels that God has finally taken away her reproach. That is, her disappointment. Joseph is the last son Jacob will have while working for Laban.
When both Leah and Rachel feel God has closed their wombs, they offer their servants to Jacob to bear other sons. Even though we would call this wrong, each of those sons are fully included as what will become the 12 tribes of Israel. We now have seen multiple lapses of judgment. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, along with their wives, all do things that were not right.
We must humbly admit we do the same. But God is always there with His unending grace, as long as we continue to repent and strive to follow Him. God will find a way even if we fall and disappoint Him.
Jacob leaves. Finally, Jacob has served his time with Laban. He has worked for him 14 years, and Rachel finally gives birth to a son, Joseph. The character of Jacob had been shown here. He did not retaliate against Laban for the deception with Leah. But now Jacob wants to leave. He distances himself from Laban's flocks. Jacob has learned how to increase unblemished sheep and goats, and his flocks increase. Now he feels he is able to provide for his family apart from Laban. God has blessed him and Jacob acknowledges this. Laban's sons start accusing him of stealing their father's wealth.
Genesis 31, 2-3. And Jacob saw the countenance of Laban, and indeed it was not favorable toward him as before. Then the Lord said to Jacob, Return to the land of your fathers and to your family, and I will be with you.
Jacob packs up all he has, including his wives and children. He departs for the promised land at God's direction.
Genesis 31, 13. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed the pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now arise, get out of this land, and return to the land of your family. As God called Abraham, Jacob is now called. And like Abraham, Jacob has learned to trust and serve the true God. He remembers how God has blessed him, and takes the first steps of the journey that will lead his children to the promised land.
God chose Jacob, not because he deserved it, but because of His grace. And yet, Jacob worked hard to try to deserve grace, which itself is a contradiction. If he deserved it, then it wouldn't be grace, it would be works, which is contrary to the gospel. Only later did Jacob start to understand the significance of God's grace and what it meant to trust God, to live by faith, and to be completely dependent on the Lord. Jacob's experience contains an important lesson for the ambitious person: do not strive to promote yourself at the expense of others.